Good evening and welcome to A Slice of Life. Tonight we're doing pesticides again. We have two very special guests with us tonight. We have Louise Washer, who is the president of the Norwalk River Watershed Association and lead organizer for Connecticut pesticide reform. We also have Mia Park, an integrated pest and pollinator management specialist at the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Ladies, welcome to A Slice of Life.
Thank you for having us.
So I'm very happy that you're here. Where do we start? Louise, would you like to go first?
I am going to start us off. I thought I would start by just talking about how I got involved with pesticides, and it did come through my work with the local watershed association along the Norwalk River. I came in, I started paying attention. I'm just a regular person with no science background, and I started looking at what are the pollutants that we need to worry about in the Norwalk River, and pesticides is one of them. And so it got on my radar, and a few years later I was working with people who were worried about declines in insects. So we together in our Southwest Connecticut towns started the pollinator pathway. That got me to like another level of recognizing what's happening with pesticides in the environment and the harms they're causing.
Right.
So flash forward to a couple years ago, we really got organized around trying to pass some legislation in Connecticut to rein in some of the highest harm pesticides that we're seeing in the environment. And we pulled together a group of about 40 conservation organizations, Xerces Society being one of them, in Connecticut. We're calling ourselves Connecticut Pesticide Reform. So it's a coalition, and we've been working in Hartford to make change. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. And Mia is here to help us with the science side of things. I'm going to talk more about the policy side of stuff. What we saw, if I can dive in a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on what we saw.
We don't want to forget about Mia.
I know. I'm going to let Mia
We'll let
talk.
you go for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just going to say one thing and then I'm going to pass it to Mia. We found out that not even that long ago that the U.S. Geological Survey tests rivers in Connecticut for pesticides because our Department of Energy and Environmental Protection doesn't have the resources. It's really expensive to test for pesticides.
Right.
So we got this treasure trove of data, and we started to see, for example, on any given year, the Norwalk River, which is one of the ones they test monthly and have for 25 years. So we have really good data on the Connecticut and Norwalk rivers.
Yeah.
There's about 30 pesticides there. And so one of them is of particular concern, but there's a lot of overuse and prophylactic use, so I was going to let Mia talk about some studies.
Yeah, and so we have found these over 30 pesticides in Connecticut rivers, and that's not unique to Connecticut. The states countrywide are seeing contamination in the rivers as well, and we'll talk about the class of pesticides called neonicotinoids that are especially concerning in these waterways. But I wanted to note that we're also finding chemicals in plants in residential areas. So Xerces just did a study of butterfly host plants in two urban centers, Albuquerque and Sacramento. And we found on average 3 pesticides in the plants, as high as 18 pesticides. And 20% of the plants sampled had lethal residues for butterflies. So this contamination is everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not just agricultural contamination. We're going to be talking about residential uses of pesticides. Golf courses, yeah. Another study by Xerces just came out looking at insecticide residues in people's backyards after mosquito control, mosquito sprays. So those are pyrethroids. And in all of them, the levels were lethal enough to kill your bees, your butterflies, anything that you'd want to attract to your garden if they were. So
I think a lot of the use that we have targeted and talked about with legislators and things that we're looking to put restrictions on are some of the overuses. So and inefficient uses, like spraying flying objects is not the best way to address to kill. But I mean, you can give a scientific version of that, but it's not effective.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think when we're talking about what can we do, conservation organizations like CPR and Xerces are really focused on those high risk but low benefit pesticides where there are alternatives. So like mosquitoes, the adult spraying isn't actually that effective, and it's prophylactic, so we're using it before we even know we need to.
Right.
Whereas we could target getting rid of water source, standing water, and we can use buckets that trap larvae, so don't
Like
spread these contaminants.
The BT, what do you call this?
I don't remember actually.
There's a, I can't say the full name, but BT, it's a naturally occurring bacteria that kills the larvae. So you can put those dunks, people think of them as mosquito dunks, in standing water as a way to kill the larvae, and that's a direct hit on the mosquito population versus spraying out into the air.
I think one of the problems with spraying is that politically it sounds like a great answer. You know, I'm doing something, when you should just empty the puddles and do things like that.
Or if it's something you can't empty, you can put these dunks in. I mean, it's important. Those are safe for the environment for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that is the struggle with pesticides and getting the message out that they're in our environment because they're invisible. We don't see them. Right. Like unlike habitat loss or clear cutting, like that's really obvious to people that there's a harm. But it's more subtle, and it requires more science and research to really figure out what's going on.
Well, one data point that I see repeatedly is that 1 square foot of lawn being treated according to EPA regulations, so it's being treated legally, can kill 1 million bees. And that just seems like a toxicity level just absurdly overpowering.
Yeah, Mia's going to get into that. I wanted to just say one more thing before we get into toxicity. That just while we're talking about inefficient and uses, prophylactic uses, I just want to say one of the things that drives me crazy is weed and feed. It's like a great example of kind of what our attitude has become about pesticide use. So weed and feed is fertilizer, but it also has an herbicide in it. So it's directions are spread this all over your lawn. So if what you're worried about is dandelions, instead of treating the dandelion with an herbicide, you're putting herbicide over your whole lawn. So this is like the pesticide industry's way of selling more product, obviously. But I think for people to just think for a minute, about just treating a problem that's actually there. There's one thing that's really standing out in my mind in a recent meeting with a retired entomologist from our Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. She was saying she had over 30 years of working with farmers, with landscapers on these issues, how to treat pests. Are we okay? And she was just saying she watched attitudes change over these last 3 decades. From pesticides are like a last resort. You try other things, it's a last resort, to now it being kind of a first go-to. There's a problem, which pesticide should we use? Oh, we can't use this pesticide. What do we replace it with? So we've had a change in attitude about that.
Well, one of the things that you might remember is growing up, driving down the road at night, your windshield of your car would get hit by dozens and dozens of bugs. And now that just doesn't happen. Maybe 1 or 2, but it's a staggering memory to have.
Folks have coined it the insect apocalypse. There have been studies that show, for example, in Germany, we have 50 fewer insects in general than we did a few decades ago. I wouldn't be surprised if it was similar here. We have 20% fewer butterflies. A recent study in Science just came out showing that
in the last 20 years,
in the last
we've lost
20%
of the butterflies, which is
staggering.
Let's talk about your activities with Connecticut pesticide reform.
It has really been to try to just bring together this coalition of different types of groups. So we when we first started working on the neonics, and I was here a couple years ago talking to you, we didn't have the beekeepers as part of our coalition. So we were like, we really focused on, bringing in beekeepers. We didn't have Trout Unlimited working with us, and the decimation by neonics and the toxicity that you're going to come back to talking about has really affected mayflies. Like in the Norwalk River, we know that the level of these neonicotinoids, these particular pesticides that we're going to talk more about, has been going up like this. You just look at the chart,
Right.
And then the Connecticut Deep has been watching in the Norwalk River since 1989 the level of mayflies, sensitive insects that live in rivers. Like fly fishermen know mayflies. They're really important to river health.
Yes.
The numbers have gone like this. We have lost 3/4 of the mayflies in the Norwalk River. So we're just calling out to everybody to join us. Join us in talking at the state level about where we can find the resources to do more testing of groundwater. We know from USGS that there are neonicotinoids in our groundwater, but not a lot of testing has been done. I think it's important as background to talk about the toxicity, getting back to your square foot of lawn. And how
let's revisit
how we
that.
got here.
So we're going to dive deeper into neonics, which are high risk, very concerning. I wanted to step out a little bit and say that what's probably the biggest issue is just all the pesticides, all the chemicals we're using. That's what's really tanking. It's the soup, right? And we don't know how they're interacting together. Their impacts are additive, sometimes synergistic.
Oh, not a lot of good action.
And the regulatory system only tests one chemical at a time on honeybees, so the level of risk is just based on if it was exposed to one. But yes, neonicotinoids are a relatively new chemical. They were brought in the 1990s as a safer selective insecticide because they really do target insects. They're really good at killing insects compared to humans.
Good, bad, or indifferent. They kill them all.
So when they came out, it was supposed to be an environmentally friendly thing. They've replaced organophosphates, things that are more toxic and carcinogenic to humans. But over time, we've realized that because they're so toxic, so kind of a similar metaphor or description, I heard a Vermont beekeeper talk about how 1 teaspoon of a neonic could kill all the honeybees in Vermont. So it really, these things are so toxic compared to other pesticides. They're also very soluble, so they're called systemic insecticides. So they're meant to be put on a seed a lot of times or sprayed on the plant, and then the plant brings that insecticide into itself. And so the pesticide needs to be water soluble to move up into the plant, into the leaves, into the pollen and the nectar. So the pollen and the nectar then get contaminated, which is why they're so problematic with pollinators. And then they're also persistent, which means they don't break down quickly. So in the soil, they can live from months to years if they're protected.
With the same toxicity?
With the same toxicity.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it will degrade over time, but
the fact that they're water soluble means that they do just flush right into our rivers, which is why we're seeing these really higher. Of 30 pesticides in the Norwalk River, there's one that's there, consistently at levels that exceed the EPA's benchmark for exposure for the insects, the lethal exposure. So they can readily move through the environment from wherever they're applied to our waters.
So I've read with this uptake that it affects the leaves, the pollen, and the flowers. And I curiously though, and perhaps suspiciously though, fruit has been left out of that description. And I have to think, if you spray apple trees, even before the apples form, maybe the apples have it a little tiny bit.
Undoubtedly.
It's in the fruit. I mean, that's the thing about food. If we're eating food that's grown with neonics, is you cannot wash it off. It's part of the plant. So for all the systemic pesticides, they're part of the plant. Yeah.
And I guess the other side is if you take a cornfield that's been sprayed and turn it into silage, over the winter the cows eat the silage and they probably have some too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the CDC did a study, and it showed that 50% of Americans are exposed to neonics, on a daily basis.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And then there was this kind of really dark study. There's going to be good news later.
Yeah.
There's a lot of doom and gloom.
This is your happy show.
The doom and gloom part.
All right. So you have some slides, I believe.
We do. Yeah. We do have some.
Can we go to some slides, Emily? There we go.
Yeah, that's kind of our opener, so that's who we are. We can go to the next one. Yeah.
There we go.
That's the overuse that we were talking about.
Yep.
And then if you go to the next one, it's where the neonicotinoids, this is kind of what we're talking about now, and a great illustration of the 1 square foot of lawn.
Oh my
there,
God.
which is really
That's like chemical weaponry.
Yeah, it is. It is.
My God.
Because neonics are having such an impact on pollinators because they're getting into the floral rewards that they're collecting, there's been a lot of research about it, and there have been some seminal studies. I mean, lab studies and field scale studies are showing lethal and sublethal effects. So lower reproduction, bees aren't able to find their nests again, things like that. But there have been some really big data studies taking pesticide data from across the country and bee abundance and butterfly abundance data, where we're seeing some really strong evidence of pesticides like neonics driving these declines in insect abundance.
One way that has been talked about that resonates for me, this is NRDC, says what neonics, they describe what they're doing into the environment as hollowing out ecosystems. So by decimating insect populations, like sort of the base of the food chain, then it moves up the food chain. Then birds are affected. There have been, we've lost 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. More bad news, but that lately there have been more studies that directly link those declines to neonics, and they're direct hits to birds and indirect hits. Because 96% of birds at the early stages of their lives depend on insects. So the loss of insects is an indirect. But then also there are these treated seeds that are coated with neonics as and one of those seeds, if a songbird eats it, out in a field, it's enough to kill a songbird. So also mammals, we're starting to see effects.
Right. So a study in North Dakota just looked at spleens of some carnivores like fishers, bobcats, and they're seeing relatively high levels of neonics in the bodies of these carnivores. So they're also magnifying up the food chain.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of data on deer, and deer show you, because they're out grazing in people's yards and all around, show you how a systemic pesticide like this can spread through the environment. It was, I think, in Minnesota, and in 2019 they did this survey of deer and found 61%, I think, had neonics in their spleen. Then in 2021 they did it again, and it was 94% of deer, and they are seeing low birth weights in fawns and deformations of the jaw. They're seeing problems in the deer population caused by neonics, and same kind of things that we see in humans. There are studies that show harms to prenatal development of the heart and brain, sperm count. So it's not, this stuff is not good for us.
No.
We thought it's better than the older pesticides, but we're now seeing, after 30 years of having this in our food, that it's not good for us.
Yeah, and just it's interesting to think about how, because these insecticides are so toxic, that in my lifetime we've seen fewer pesticide or insecticides used over time, but actually our landscapes are more toxic to our insects.
We just
our
got
bees.
really
Yeah.
good at making
Yeah,
insecticides.
we're really good.
So good at
killing
making
bugs.
poison. Yes.
All right, so we're going to go to break shortly.
Okay.
And when we come back, I want to talk almost exclusively about your work, the legislation that your organization is working on.
Where there's a lot more good news to talk
Yes.
about. So we'll have a more cheerful second half.
Well, I do agree with you that it is
Yeah.
time in this conversation for some happy news.
Yeah.
So if we could go to a break. And let me just preface this break by saying these are what you'll see is a floral montage that I took in my garden last August. And again, in my property, I don't use any pesticides, none of that stuff. I barely use fertilizer. And I have to think that Better Homes and Garden will not be visiting my property anytime soon. However, I have a lot of insects and happy bugs in my yard. So if we could go to this 2-minute break, and the song with it is called the Happy Flower Song. Okay, welcome back. That was the floral montage with the happy song. And now we're going to get into some current news about what's going on in Hartford. Louise, you want to take the lead on that?
I will start us off on this. Yeah, I actually have some good news to tell you. This group, Connecticut Pesticide Reform, came together formally, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, but it was been growing for about 4 years.
Yeah.
So we were focused on passing some legislation in Connecticut to restrict kind of the highest harm, lowest benefit uses of these neonicotinoids that we're talking about. So, lawn and garden use, overuse that we saw, that was our main goal. And last year, in May of 2025, we did pass a bill that starting in October 2027, almost completely bans, really heavily restricts use of all neonicotinoids on all lawns, golf courses, all turf grass.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so that was great news and really a victory, and that's 350,000 acres in Connecticut. We have 350,000 acres of just lawn of different sorts. So that will be free of neonicotinoids.
Now, why does it take till October of 27?
That was a disappointment for us.
Yeah.
Another disappointment, just to temper the good news, is that up until like the 11th hour, the bill also included a ban on use for ornamental landscaping, like trees and shrubs, that would be around the lawn. So, I mean, ideally, originally with the ban, we would like to have seen restrictions on uses at nurseries, on agricultural, on the treated seed we've been talking about. Those got kind of knocked off the bill early. But so neighboring states that have bills like Connecticut's do include the trees and shrubs.
Right.
So New Jersey, Maine, New York, Vermont. So
Vermont, I was going to say Vermont.
We are going to need to come back to this, but it's interesting that now we can watch the testing of the rivers. So after 2027, we can see, how much of a difference is it making that we're not using this on lawns now. Another issue that has come up is what will it be replaced with? Like I was saying, the attitude now is like, oh, we can't use this. What else do we use instead of let's try to not
right? What's the substitution? Did you want to talk about?
You go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say I think the ban or the prohibition on the lawn and turf is so powerful because it seems like we were seeing spikes in the river data that correlated to when those neonics were being used on golf courses and lawns.
Yeah, they're used to kill grubs. That's their main use on lawns. And you could see in the graphs going like this, like up in the summertime when those neonics were going down, like July is like the height of when those are used to kill adult grubs. And you just see these big peaks. So we're fairly certain that it'll make a big difference to not have them on lawns. It is true that grubs were becoming resistant to the neonic that's usually used, imidacloprid. So I think that's how we were able to pass this bill, that the industry's like, we're gonna have to move to another pesticide anyway. So the pesticide that they're really moving to is chlorantraniliprole, which is a diamide. Do you wanna do that?
Which is less toxic maybe to bees, but thousands of times more toxic to butterflies, and we're
very toxic to aquatic
life
and oysters. So that is like ringing a lot of alarm bells in Connecticut.
Which is where Xerxes comes in with the invertebrate animal population.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an amazing coalition to be part of for us.
Yeah, talk about Xerxes a little bit. We didn't get to, in case people aren't familiar with this.
Absolutely. Like other nonprofit conservation organizations, we use lots of different tools to conserve wildlife, but we happen to focus on the microfauna, the creatures that people don't tend to look at, like insects, oysters, things without a backbone, but no less important. A lot of times they're the foundation of a healthy ecosystem. So they're the base of a food web, or they're decomposers, pollinators, and we do that through pushing to protect endangered species, policy, creating habitat, and I'm on the pesticide team, so really trying to work with others to reduce pesticide use in ag and residential areas.
And I'm just going to give a plug myself.
Okay.
The Xerxes website is the greatest place to go to if you are trying to figure out, I have a pest problem in my yard, I'm thinking about what I might use as a last resort. How toxic are specific pesticides to pollinators? Because even some organic, natural pesticides can be moderately toxic to pollinators. So I just can't say enough about all the science that's in and like mosquitoes. Like I always steer people to the page about how to deal with mosquitoes because it's all there on the Xerces.
Yeah, and we really do. All of our conservation is backed by science, so we spend a lot of time just summarizing and distilling the latest science for folks through outreach materials.
Well, several shows ago, I had a Xerces ambassador come on, and she was marvelously educational. And so in preparation for that show, I went to the Xerces website, and I just found it full of information that you could use in your yard to help, have a cleaner yard, cleaner, I guess, micro environment in your backyard.
That's great. Yeah, that ambassador program is amazing. It really allows us to work with volunteers who are very trained and knowledgeable and get our message out. Yeah.
She was great.
That's
so
awesome.
How long have you been with Xerces?
I have only been there for about a year and a few months. So it's been a huge learning curve. Before this, I was a professor, so I did my dissertation work on apple pollinators and how insecticides and natural habitat influence their populations. And that's actually where I got really interested in pesticides, because we saw a very, dramatic negative correlation between how much insecticides you used and how many bees were there. But what we didn't expect was to see the negative impact of fungicides, which at the time growers touted. I mean, the industry and growers thought they were completely safe for bees, and they were being sprayed during bloom. And so it was just an aha moment for me that there's more going on with these these pesticides that we're using. Yeah.
I always think when I start thinking about pesticides and stuff, I always think back to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and the struggle that she went through to write that book and that to bring that to the forefront like you guys are. Just what are we doing to ourselves is the question I keep asking.
People are responding, though. I mean, one of the projects that I've worked on is the pollinator pathway, which started out in one town as something that was just going to be in one town. In 2017, when the insect apocalypse information came out from Germany, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Oh my God!
But that just grew organically across the Northeast, and now it is across the country. It's we did a webinar last night with Emily May, a colleague of Mia's from Xerces, and we had a couple thousand people sign up for a pesticide talk, which is, a webinar like at night. You're
like on people's free time.
We had great questions. Like I want to thank you for shining the light on this issue, because I think people are ready to question what I was saying, like the attitude of, there's a pest, like what poison do I throw on it? Like we are rethinking that as a society, and also like how your yard looks, should it look like a golf course, or should it look like the flower montage? It should look like the flower montage.
Yes. So a little story here. I have, and again, I don't use any pesticides, chemicals in my yard. And so in one little corner of my yard, under the bird feeder, oddly enough, I have a lot of mole tunnels.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what they're eating, but they're very busy there. So one day a fox came in, and he was doing just like you see on TV, the head tilt, and then he did the launch up. And I'm thinking, there's only 2 inches of snow there. If he can't see it, why is he doing this? And anyways, so he did the leap up thing. He dug furiously, and he pulled up a mole.
Wow.
He pulled a mole from my yard. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago to somebody, and he said, well, your lawn's going to be a lot better now. And I'm thinking, I didn't want to get into it with him at that point. And I said, no, not really. And my take is moles, they eat the fauna of the soil, and then they go and they create manure and they spread it around and stuff. And so I don't think moles are...
But I do think there's something to be said for having the type of yard that has foxes coming in and has moles and has a diversity, like has a food chain that's working. Because I think when you just have it down to just, no native flora or fauna, is just like grass, and then you just have, what we have is, we know, white-footed deer and I mean, white-footed mice and deer, and we get these problems like the Lyme disease. I think, you know, we know specific possums, don't they eat thousands of ticks a day? And you know,
I never heard that.
Yeah, and just you know, just the natural cycle, I think, takes care of itself. A lot of beneficial insects, you know, pollinators that we need.
Right. Working with Xerces, I didn't realize before this that only 2% of our insects are pests, actually pests. And so we're controlling these 2%, right, the small minority with these chemicals that affect all of them. And
yes.
And so I think, you know, it was like the Green Revolution, fantastic. These chemicals are so efficient and useful, but now we're realizing that we've really
slow down a little bit,
destroyed the natural
and
systems
there's been some
that were
good
in place.
Marketing on the side of the sellers of these pesticides. I think that's also what's going on. You know, these are so safe, and you should, you know, convenient, and so we have to question that.
I think the other thing we're fighting is the mindset that, you know, lawns, beautiful manicured lawns are what you really need. And you know, my father had a perfect lawn. Well, my father did, but you know, I'm just saying, people in general, my father, my grandfather had a perfect lawn. I'm gonna have a perfect lawn. And if I have to put these chemicals in, I'm gonna have a perfect lawn. Because oh my God, the property value. Which I don't know if that's if you can substantiate that.
It's changing too. I think it's definitely changing.
I hope so.
I mean, it starts to look a little uninformed to have a lawn like that. You know, it kind of like, I think the cool is wearing off, and there are some ambassadors out there like Edwina von Gall out in the Hamptons creating these just gorgeous rewilded landscapes, and, you know, making it look just really beautiful, and it's alive, you know. It's so fun. I mean, you must know this. Like when I started realizing, oh, stop the mowing and blowing, and see what happens. You walk outside, I can't even get to my car because I'm like, oh my God, there's some, you know, clear wing moth, or like, well, what is this thing? I have to look it up. And it's cool.
So at the recording of this program, we're about 40 days from spring, and so I look out on my lawn, I see 6 inches of snow, and I think, oh my God. It can't come soon
like
enough.
It's coming.
But now, during this 40 days, is when we can focus on the Connecticut legislative session, which is in session.
Let's go to the new.
The new bill.
At this point, the legislative session is about 4 days old.
Or 2 days old,
2 days old. The current legislative session's 2 days old. And what are we planning on doing this year?
So the Connecticut Pesticide Reform Coalition, we backed up. We looked at, you know, our victory that was not all we wanted, but was a victory on neonics. And one of the things we learned during the process, the 4 years of trying to pass something on neonics, is that we don't have a lot of data in Connecticut that's accessible that tells us like what pesticides are being used, how much, and where. And so, you know, I went to the hearings about the neonics, trying to pass this bill, talking to legislators, and I would say, we know that, you know, whatever it was, 80% of the neonics being used in New Jersey are being used on lawns. And they would say, oh, that's New Jersey. Like, we need to know, and legitimately, we need to know what's happening in Connecticut.
And you were telling me that having the data from the rivers was a huge
so we
huge
found out that
success.
the USGS was testing the rivers, and we could see how much neonics were showing up in the rivers. We didn't have that for the first 2 years. So we went and we worked with a postdoc at UConn, and he put together that data with some other testing that we'd done in a report, talked about the declines that DEEP had showed in river insects, and we were able to hand that to the legislators to say, you know, look, here's evidence that this is in our environment. So this year we stepped back and we were like, you know, we couldn't just go to a database system like you can in New York or in Massachusetts or in California or in New Jersey to see how much of this specific neonic is being used. Maybe we need to update and modernize our system. So we proposed the Pesticide Data Modernization Act as something that we hope the Environment Committee will take up. They do at this moment have it on the list to discuss at their first meeting, which is today.
Okay.
So hopefully we're going to move forward this year with a bill that would, so right now, well, when we started this, the state does collect this information about what's being used.
Right.
But it was written on a piece of paper at the end of the year. Landscapers, farmers, everybody have to write out what they use, and DEEP kept them in big boxes. So you had to submit a FOIA request, which we did, got permission. You go into the basement of the DEEP building, and they bring out this cart with all these boxes.
Down the dark hall.
Yes, it's a dark hall. I'm not kidding. And the first thing I thought is like, well, the agencies can't be using this data. Like, no researchers. I mean, maybe, some researchers have come down here into this dark dungeon. But it's just inefficient, not transparent, and not helping us pass good policy. So anyway, they did in 2021 update the system to be digital, but what it is now is it's that same piece of paper. You take a picture of it and you upload it. So it's filed under the last name of the person who filed it. So you can't search for a specific chemical.
It's not a database.
Yeah,
it's just files of pictures.
And you can't come up with summaries of like what are we putting on our landscapes in Connecticut, and what's showing up in the environment, and how do we, what policy do we want to pass? So this would update that. It would create a searchable database.
That's wonderful.
Accessible to everybody, and it would also, one more thing I want to talk about, are these treated seeds. So
treated what?
The treated seeds, agricultural seeds.
Right.
There's a loophole. It's at the federal level.
Of course there's a loophole.
There's a loophole that a pesticide that's registered as a pesticide, once it's put on a seed, is no longer treated as a pesticide, no longer considered. So it's not monitored, it's not tracked. We don't keep count of how much is used anywhere except Vermont in 2017 started tracking what pesticide treated seed was sold in the state.
Right.
So we have that as part of our bill this year, that we want to it doesn't ask anything of farmers or people who use the seeds. It's just the sellers. Right down at the end of the year, what did I sell in the state of Connecticut, so that we just have that data. So we're really hoping that stays in the bill.
Now, was there a last slide you wanted to look at?
I did make a slide with that information, but
well, there we have our bumblebee.
There we are, and that's Victor, who puts on he's actually a lepidopterist. He's a butterfly specialist, but he wears his bee suit when we go to Hartford, and
he knows a lot about bees too.
He does know a lot about bees. He also gets a lot of attention. He gets a lot.
He's a character.
He throws out pollen balls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the good news. The challenge
is ahead.
We talked about chlorantraniliprole,
Well, I was gonna, if we could go back to the recording of treated seed. So the USDA or USGS, the government,
USDA,
the federal government used to monitor pesticides at least neonicotinoids on seeds until 2014. And you can see the consistent rise of the use of these neonics, and then all of a sudden in 2015, there's nothing because they stopped monitoring. So it really is up to the states now to do that kind of record keeping. And without that data, we can't do these larger studies that are looking at that basically showed us that neonics and pyrethroids are driving butterfly and bee declines.
And the other reason that just understanding the use of these treated seeds is important is that there have been so many studies, hundreds of studies at this point, coming out of Cornell mainly, and I think University of Vermont.
It was summarized by Cornell.
Hundreds of studies summarized by Cornell, put together in a report that came out in 2020 showing, they did field trials. They were like, are these treated seeds? This is the biggest source of neonics in the environment in our country, these treated seeds. And it's prophylactic, it's obviously before the plant has grown, the pesticide is there. Is this working? Is this like a great boon for farmers? Are they yields exploding? And they found with some types of plants, yes, it is benefiting farmers with fruit trees and pumpkins and things. But they have found consistently that corn, soybean, and wheat, these big row crops, which is the main use or the biggest use, that farmers are really not seeing increases in yield.
I did read that, yeah.
So some states have passed legislation to ban the use,
Right.
New York and Vermont.
And the kicker is farmers can't get corn without, I mean, they basically just get corn with treatments from the get-go.
Yeah, almost 100% of corn.
Right, unless they special order corn seeds
Which
that
is
are
probably
not.
more expensive.
I don't know if it's more expensive, but it's hard. They make it harder for you to get.
I bet.
And they did this in 2017 or 2019 in Quebec. Anyway, we have a years ago model. In Quebec, they banned the use of seeds on these row crops, use of treated seeds on these row crops. And everybody was like, oh, they're not going to be able to get the seed. And seed providers are like, okay, here's the seed. I mean, and I think New York has done this. It hasn't gone to effect yet. I think it's 2029. And Vermont. So if we have Quebec, New York, Vermont, maybe if more Northeast states come together, that's a real market for corn seeds without poison.
Yeah. But yeah, if we can get records of use of seeds that are treated in Connecticut, that would just be really great. It would fill a data gap that we have
because if this passes and we have this great searchable database about where everything's being used, we'll just have this hole where the treated seeds are.
Right.
And we don't grow a lot of wheat and soybean in Connecticut, and the corn is mostly grown by dairy farmers for silage. So it's not a huge part of, probably the numbers are not
not like the Midwest.
Right, not like the Midwest, but still an important part of the story to know.
Yeah. Right. And I think the other thing that I don't understand how this loophole where if the pesticide is on the seed, it's no longer a pesticide, because I think the assumption then must be that the pesticide goes into the plant. But in fact, there are studies that show that only 2 to 4% of neonics go into the plant, and the rest goes into the soil and then the environment.
And those are industry studies. The pesticide makers themselves have shown this 95%. Is that right?
No, it's independent.
That's why I need Mia here. It's not an industry study.
No, that's a Pennsylvania state study.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
This is why have to have her by my side to correct me on the science. Another thing before we wrap up, can I change it a little bit? I wanted to go back to chlorantraniliprole, the new. So this is like the replacement for neonics on lawns. They're very effective at killing grubs.
Yeah.
So we did, the USGS unfortunately doesn't test for this pesticide. So we, as a group of towns in Southwest Connecticut, have done a couple years of our own studies. We're working with a lab at UConn to just see, is this stuff, it's less water soluble, but is it showing up in rivers? And we are seeing it at small levels in rivers. In about 60% of the rivers that we tested, we did see it there. And the concern is that it's very toxic to moths and butterflies and to aquatic insects, but also oysters. I just wanted to come back to that because it's a big concern in the shellfish world. Is like starting in 2027, we're no longer going to be using. We feel like there's going to be a big move to this newer pesticide. And there haven't been really good studies about the effects on oyster larvae.
Right.
So we're, DEEP doesn't have the resources to test these kinds of emerging contaminants as the category for them. So this CPR group, we're working with Connecticut Audubon, and Trout Unlimited is coming in at state level, and the Pollinator Pathway, and just a whole group. We're applying for grant funding, and we've gotten a couple grants, and we have a couple more waiting to come in to test the rivers for both the neonics and this newer pesticide. But also, we're working with a group of ecotoxicologists at UConn to set up a study to really see how is this and maybe the combination going to affect oysters.
No, I think the thing for the general public is in water contamination is unless there's fish belly up in the river, it's easy to convince yourself that that's not that big a problem.
Yeah.
Even though systemically it probably is.
That's why, I think for our state, the oyster industry is a $30 million industry. It's employing people. It's our food.
It's big money.
It's an important part of our culture too. You know, part of our history is oystering and the health of the sound. And so, you know, all of this stuff is ending up in the sound. And there really just hasn't been as much studies on
Well,
that.
this is all making me think about the importance of this searchable database that CPR is trying to pass this year, is that regardless on what the next chemical is, at least we'll be able to track, like, what are those chemicals that are being used more and more? Yeah. What are those chemicals of high concern that we should be really paying attention to?
So as a layperson, it's hard for me to understand why anybody would say this searchable database legislation is a bad idea and I'm not going to support it. Well, it's hard for me to get to that point.
Well, everything is hard to pass because if it's going to cost any money. So we're going to say we're going to have to hire someone, even though the e-license system that we already have could just be updated. We're hoping, and there are tech people already working at DEEP. So we're hoping that that's not the big pushback, and that this passes. But I think I think the pushback will be cost. I think everybody agrees it's kind of a good idea to know, except maybe around the seeds. I'm really hoping that there's not pushback around the seeds. I think the industry itself is seeing these bans on treated seed. You know, this is their bottom line. So there's a lot of push, and there's lobbyists.
We need another chemical.
Exactly. Right. They have a lot of sway in Hartford. You know, they have a lot of power.
So who would be who would bear the cost of this searchable database? Is it like
would come
state thing?
Yeah. So at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the pesticide department there, which comes under the the waste. Oh, I'm going to not want to be quoted on this, but
it's buried in some acronym.
The pesticide department is who we have met with and talked to about this bill, and you know, they seem like open. Think that it's, you know, I mean, as you said, how is this not a good idea?
Okay, so what I typically do on these programs is I say, what do you want from the public? What do you want the average guy? What do you want him to do?
Well,
he or she. What do you want he or she to do?
I mean, first off, just on the legislation, I think to let your state representative and state senator know that you support this pesticide data modernization, updating, keeping track of pesticides in the state, that you support that.
So
That's
be the
important.
squeaky wheel.
Yeah, get on the phone, call them up and say, I just watched this amazing TV show and I learned that we need to do a better job of tracking pesticide use, and can you support this if it comes up in the legislature? That would be one thing.
And I mean, for me, it's, let's keep creating habitat, let's keep planting native plants for our pollinators, but let's also make sure we're protecting that habitat from pesticides and using alternative methods.
Wow. Ladies, I think we covered a lot of information. I can't thank you enough. I think this has been an excellent program, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Very good. So that's it for tonight. Pesticides, pay attention, contact your legislator, and be okay with this searchable database. Tell them it's a good idea.
Yes.
Thank you and good night.
Awesome.